All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go back on the record in the conditional use hearing for the Bethlehem Landfill, Lower Saucon Township. The microphone system that we're using in this room for witnesses and attorneys, you need to hold down the button the entire time. It's a little bit annoying, but it's a little different than the setup we have over at the township building. So please be mindful of that, and I would just ask that you speak directly into the microphones so that you can be heard. It certainly sounds like this system is a little bit louder than the one we have at the township building. So before we get into evidentiary issues today, we have had 2 continuances that I want to announce for the record in this matter, and also introduce some exhibits related to notice concerning those continuances. So we had a previous hearing that was scheduled for Friday, March 24th, 2023, that was going to be held at the Lower Saucon Township building. That hearing was continued altogether, and no hearing was held on that day. A public notice was posted at the township building that provided continuance of that hearing to today, March 30th, but the notice provided that today's hearing would start at 9 a.m. So I'm going to mark the public notice and the postings as Hearing Officer Exhibit 7 related to the continuance of the March 24th hearing. And then this morning, our hearing was scheduled to start at 9 a.m. as I just announced. However, there was another continuance granted such that we're starting today at 12:30. And again, I prepared a public notice. That public notice was posted here at the fire hall, and it was also posted at the Lower Saucon Township building. So I'm going to mark the public notice as well as the photos indicating the posting as Hearing Officer Exhibit 8. And I can supply copies of those exhibits to council by way of email. All right. With that, do we have any other procedural matters that we want to address before we get into evidentiary issues? I know, Ms. Garber, you're going to be moving for the admission of certain documents that were referenced at the last hearing, but any other procedural matters that have to be addressed before that? All right. Seeing none, then why don't we take that issue up first? What exhibits are you moving to admit?
So yes, these all relate to Joseph McDowell's testimony. The first is BLC 71, which is his CV.
Okay. Objection. All right. Any objection from anyone? All right. BLC 71 will be admitted.
The next is BLC 16, which is the February 23rd, 2023. Oh, this was our... No, sorry. So this goes back. It was
right.
A lower number because we talked about it earlier in the proceedings. The February 23rd, 2023, Martin & Martin response to January 24, 2023, Hanover Engineering Review Letter.
Okay. And this witness was the one who was able to authenticate that document, right? And that's why it was deferred until this time?
Correct.
Okay. Any objection to BL 16 being admitted?
No.
Anyone else? All right. BLC 16 will be admitted.
The next is BLC 68, which is the March 3rd, 2023 Hanover Engineering Review Letter.
Okay. Any objection to that being admitted?
No objection.
Okay. Anyone else? BLC 68 will be admitted.
The next is BLC 72, which was the Phase 5 Conceptual Final Grading Plan.
No objection.
Okay. Any other objections? Seeing none, BLC 72 will be admitted.
The next is BLC 73, which was the typical landscaping notes and details.
Any objection to that?
No. No objection.
Any other parties wishing to object? Seeing none, BLC 73 will be admitted.
The next is BLC 74, which is the Phase 5 Conceptual Closure / Vegetation Plan.
Any objection to BLC 74 being admitted?
No objection.
Any other objections? None. BLC 74 is admitted.
The next one is BLC 75A, the Bethlehem Landfill Phase 5 Expansion Comparison Chart.
Any objection to BLC 75A?
No objection.
Okay. Any other?
One more, BLC 76, the Proposed Conservation Plan.
All right. And let me just make sure the record's clear. I will admit BLC 75A and then BLC 76. Any objection to BLC 76 being admitted?
No objection.
Any others? No. Okay, so BLC 76 will be admitted. And that takes care of it or at least for now, and then maybe at the end of your presentation today, we'll be moving for more exhibits.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Anything else before we get into your next witness, Ms. Garber?
No, that's it.
All right. Then you may proceed with calling your next witness.
Thank you. I would like to call Timothy Kramer to the stand, please.
All right, Mr. Kramer, we're going to have you come up to the front here. And as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, you do have to hold down the button that's on that microphone in front of you while you testify, okay? And before we get into your testimony, we'll have you state and then spell your name, and then I'm going to have you sworn in, okay?
No, go ahead. Timothy Kramer, Timothy Kramer.
Sir, can you raise your right hand for me? Sir, do you swear, beyond swear, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, Ms. Garber, you may proceed.
Thank you. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Timothy Kramer, personal address?
Professional address is fine.
81 Highland Avenue, Suite 230, Bethlehem, PA 18017.
Mr. Kramer, you have a exhibit binder in front of you. Could you please turn to BLC 77? Take a look at that. Do you recognize that?
Yes,
What is it?
my professional resume.
Okay. And just referring to BLC 77 and the series of questions that I'm going to ask you, can you tell us what do you do for a living?
I'm a project engineer for Panoni Associates, working as a traffic engineer in their transportation division.
What is Panoni Associates?
Panoni Associates is a full-service civil engineering firm specializing in civil site development, planning, structures, water, wastewater, traffic and transportation engineering, geotechnical, construction, inspection, and management, buildings and building systems, to name a few relevant industries.
Does Panoni have more than one office?
Yes, we have 41 offices, 13 within Pennsylvania.
And which of those offices do you work out of?
The Bethlehem office.
Are you a registered professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yes, I am.
That's what the PE at the end of your name on your CV
Correct.
stands for. Is your registration current?
Yes.
Are you registered in any other states?
I'm registered in Delaware as well.
Is that registration current?
Yes.
So it says here on your CV that in addition to being a PE, you are a PTOE. What is a PTOE?
PTOE stands for Professional Traffic Operations Engineer. It's a certification.
What do you have to do to get that certification?
You need 4 years of experience in traffic operations engineering, a valid state license, and you also have to take a certification exam.
Do you have to do anything to maintain that certification?
You have to maintain 15 professional development hours on average every year for every 3-year renewal.
So you said that you work in the traffic division of Panoni Associates, is that correct?
Yes.
Are there other PTOEs at Panoni within that division?
Yes, we have 10 PTOEs, 7 of which are in Pennsylvania.
And are there other PEs that work in the traffic division that are not PTOEs?
Yes, we have 104 PEs, 64 of which are in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Can you describe your educational background for us?
Sure, I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Drexel University,
And when did you graduate?
2007.
How long have you worked for Pannoni?
I've been with Pannoni for a year and a half.
Can you describe your experience preparing traffic-related or traffic impact-related studies for development projects while you've been at Pannoni for the past year and a half?
Sure, I've prepared and been involved in multiple traffic impact related studies for developments, including reviewing traffic studies prepared for other firms for PennDOT, many of which are listed on my resume.
And included on your resume the work that you're doing currently for this project, correct?
Yes.
Before you worked at Pannoni, what did you do?
I worked on land development projects, preparing transportation impact related studies, highway occupancy permit plans, municipal land development reviews, including traffic impact studies, municipal design projects, and PennDOT highway design projects throughout the Commonwealth.
And you did that while working for engineering firms other than Pannoni?
Correct.
And what were those firms? They're on BLC 77, I take it?
Correct.
Okay. So, yeah, if you just name the firms.
McTish, Kunkel & Associates, which is now CDR McGuire, Greenman Peterson, Hanover Engineering, RKR Hess, Alfred Finch.
Slow down when you're doing these. Can you rename them? I didn't catch the first one.
McTish, Kunkel & Associates, which is now CDR McGuire, Greenman Peterson, Hanover Engineering, RKR Hess, Alfred Benish and Company, and Traffic Planning and Design.
And just to reiterate, when you were at those firms, you also had experience analyzing the traffic impact of development projects. Is that what your area of expertise was?
Yes.
Looking at BLC 77, which is your resume, if you look at page 2, it says here that you worked on a project for Alliance Sanitary Landfill. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I prepared a transportation impact study in December of 2021 for submission to PennDOT and DEP for the landfill, which was to evaluate increasing the permitted maximum daily volume intake of the landfill from 3,000 tons to 5,500 tons per day.
Are you familiar with the Bethlehem Landfill?
Yes.
And how is that?
I was asked to prepare transportation impact analysis by my firm. I spoke with my colleague Earl Armitage, who was involved in prior work for the landfill, who assigned the project to me, and he gave me background on the previous study that was conducted in June of 2000, and also a letter of crash analysis for the township in 2016.
So Pannoni had been doing work as a firm for the landfill for years before you joined?
That is correct.
And so when the project came in, you spoke with Earl Armitage and he gave it to you?
That's correct.
So what do you know about the Phase 5 expansion project?
That the landfill is looking to expand onto adjacent property that is owned by the landfill, and that the operations of the landfill are to remain the same with the same current permitted volume intake.
Did you ultimately prepare a transportation impact analysis for the Phase 5 expansion?
Yes, I did.
Have you ever been qualified as an expert in any administrative or court proceeding?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
I was accepted as an expert witness in 2022 at the Sugarloaf Township, Luzerne County Zoning Hearing Board as a traffic expert witness.
And what was the subject matter in which you were qualified as an expert in that proceeding?
It was to testify about a planned 4 million square foot warehouse project.
And you were an expert in traffic analysis and traffic impact in that proceeding?
Yes, it was on traffic analysis, trip generation, and transportation design.
I'd ask the hearing officer to accept Mr. Kramer as an expert in traffic engineering, traffic impact analysis, and trip generation estimates and design.
Any voir dire?
I have a few questions. If I may.
Yes.
Mr. Kramer, have you ever provided your services to a municipality, or have you been strictly representing and acting as an advocate on behalf of developers?
In several of my previous employers, I have done work for municipalities who have hired the firms I was employed by to do services.
And were those services traffic-related services?
Usually, yes, they were.
And were one of those firms that you had been previously employed by Hanover Engineering?
That is correct.
And had you been asked by Hanover Engineering to perform these traffic studies and services?
Yes.
And you know Hanover Engineering is the engineering firm that represents this municipality, is that correct?
Yes.
Have you had any conversations with representatives of Hanover Engineering in connection with your work in this project?
No.
No further questions.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to question regarding qualifications? No. Let me just ask one question. You mentioned this. You mentioned the status you have, the PTOE status, right?
Correct.
I don't know that I heard testimony concerning when you achieved that. Was that 4 years after you were out of college, or was it longer into your career?
The PTOE certification I obtained in 2019.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, any objection to him being qualified as an expert as requested?
No.
All right. He will be qualified as an expert as stated. You may proceed with questions.
Thank you. Mr. Kramer, when you're asked to prepare a scope or proposal for a traffic analysis for a development project, what kind of information is relevant to that analysis?
Typically, the information we obtain when beginning those activities, we look for project location, proposed access points, what the surrounding roadway network is, also the size and type of the use that's planned for that development.
With respect to the Phase 5 expansion project that you were asked to do an analysis for, what information about that project was relevant to your analysis?
Again, the size and location of the expansion, any changes of operations, including traffic related to the site.
So I think you had testified earlier when you were asked about what you knew about the Phase 5 expansion, that it was an expansion of the existing, or an extension of the existing operation. Is that accurate?
Correct.
So in terms of what changes resulting from that expansion that would be relevant to your analysis, were there any?
We were informed that the operations were to remain the same hours of operation, same permitted limits for intake at the landfill.
What about access?
We were informed that the current landfill driveway was to remain active and also to investigate potential access for future.
I'm going to ask you to turn to BLC 78, if you would, please. Do you recognize this?
Yes,
What is it?
it's the highway occupancy permit for the landfill driveway to Apple Butter Road.
Is this the access road that is going to be used for the Phase 5 expansion, is your understanding?
Yes, this is the for the current and proposed access road.
And is this HOP permit still in effect?
Yes.
There was testimony earlier in this proceeding regarding PennDOT acknowledgement of the validity of, continuing validity of this HOP permit. Are you aware of such request?
Yes.
And do you know what the status of that is?
We have requested a response from PennDOT and submitted the study to PennDOT to review, but we have not gotten a response yet.
Okay. So that's pending before PennDOT.
Yes.
And just for the record, we'll submit that letter as soon as it's received. But so the record is clear, the access is remaining the same, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what about the, are you aware, do you know whether waste trucks coming to the Bethlehem landfill are required to use a particular route?
For larger trucks, there is a designated haul route for the landfill.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to turn to Exhibit 79 in your witness binder, please. And when you say for larger trucks, do you mean anything other than local collection trucks?
The larger tractor trailers, yes.
Do you recognize Exhibit 79?
Yes.
And what does this show?
This shows the current haul route for the Bethlehem landfill.
And do you know if that haul route is approved by any agency?
My understanding is that would be approved by DEP.
Okay, and can you using your pointer that I gave you, can you, just because it's a little hard to see, can you point out the haul route and describe it, please?
Sure. The haul route starts at 412 at the interchange of I-78, proceeding north to Shimersville Road, proceeding northeast to Apple Butter Road, and then east along Apple Butter Road to the landfill.
Are any of the roads along that haul route township-owned roads?
No.
Who are they owned by?
All the roads on the haul route are under PennDOT jurisdiction.
Would you please turn to BLC 80 in your witness binder, please? Mr. Kramer, do you recognize BLC 80?
Yes.
And what is it?
It is the transportation impact analysis prepared by Pinoni.
Okay, so you can refer to BLC 80 as I ask you this next series of questions if you need to. Can you please describe what the objectives of the transportation impact analysis were as you were hired to do?
The objectives were to evaluate the existing roadway network around the Bethlehem landfill and to determine if the expansion project would have any impacts or negative effects on the roadway network.
What was the scope of your analysis?
In terms of the intersections and the area that we studied, it included Apple Butter Road from the property limits of the Bethlehem landfill to Shimersville Road.
Were there other intersections along that haul route that you showed us that were not examined?
Yes, the intersection of 412 and Shimersville Road and 412 with the I-78 interchange were not evaluated.
And why were they not evaluated?
We used our engineering judgment to find an appropriate scope for this project, given that the operations were not changing, as well as the multi-million-dollar improvement that PennDOT had constructed along the 412 corridor that were designed to accommodate larger trucks as a result of the adjacent developments.
And what were some of those adjacent developments, if you can recall?
I think there were LVIP distribution centers along the 412 corridor.
Do you know when those improvements to the roads in that area, specifically State Route 412, were done? Any sense of the timing of those?
I think they were completed around 2016.
So for the area that you investigated and the specific roads, that is Apple Butter Road and Chimersville Road, can you describe those existing roadway characteristics?
Sure.
Would it help if we brought the visual back up so everyone could see which roads Mr. Kramer is talking about? Let's do that. Okay, please, if you could describe the roadway characteristics and use your pointer when you're referring to a specific road, please.
Sure. Apple Butter Road, State Route 2012, as I mentioned, is a state-owned and maintained roadway that runs through the city of Bethlehem and Lower Saucon Township within the area of our study. Has a posted speed limit of 35 and 40 miles an hour, depending on the municipality. One lane of travel in each direction with horizontal curvature in different areas, which are signed appropriately to traverse through the area. The geometry, I'm sorry, the pavement and the pavement markings that from our observations all appear to be in good condition. Also, Chimersville Road, which is SR 2014, is a state-owned and maintained roadway running north-south in the vicinity of our study area. It has 2 lanes in each travel direction with a right turn lane onto Apple Butter Road at the Apple Butter and Chimersville Road intersection. That road also has a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit in the study area.
Can you describe the land uses along the approach route?
There are several land uses of varying types, including residential, commercial, industrial, and agricultural.
So when you do a transportation impact analysis, are you doing that analysis with respect to certain study periods?
We typically evaluate the weekday AM commuter peak hours, which are 7 to 9 a.m., and the afternoon PM peak hour period, which is between 4 and 6 p.m.
And just backing up before we get into the details of that, in terms of the years in which you're looking at the impacts that you're analyzing, I think you referred to them as study periods in your report.
Oh yes, the scenarios that we evaluate include the existing conditions to give you a snapshot of what the roadway conditions are today. Then you typically look at future analysis to see if there are any impacts in the future as well.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to look at page 1 of BLC 80, please, which is your report. And I'm going to, if you would, just look at the second to last paragraph from the bottom. Does this paragraph talk about the study periods that you evaluated with respect to the Phase 5 project?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell us about those, please?
Sure. We evaluated the existing conditions, which were at the end of 2022. On the date of the counts that we performed, we did our analysis based on the actual tonnage and the existing traffic that the landfill experienced on that day, which was 1,414 tons. With that being below the maximum, we also evaluated the existing conditions under the maximum daily volume using volume estimates.
Okay,
And then
I'm just going to stop you there for a second, just so we're clear. So when you evaluated this, you looked at existing conditions in 2022 at 1,414 tons per day because that was the actual volume that was taken into the landfill on that day. Is that correct?
Correct.
But then you also looked at existing conditions as of December 2022 assuming that they took in the maximum that they're allowed to take under their permit?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. If you would, then it looks like there's a third study period that you looked at?
Yes, and then we did a future year analysis of 2032, again, assuming the maximum daily volume at the landfill.
So that you could, and is the purpose of that so you can assess the potential impact for the period 10 years from the time of the actual study?
Correct.
So can you sort of generally describe for us what you do and what you did in performing this study?
Sure. First, we conducted turning movement traffic counts at the study area intersections. We performed a review of the intake data from the landfill on the date of the counts to correlate that with the traffic counts. We performed a field view of Apple Butter Road from Shimersville Road to the property limits of the landfill, evaluating road condition, signing placement, pavement marking conditions, and we also requested reportable crash data from PennDOT to do an analysis, and then we performed the capacity analysis for the three scenarios that we evaluated based on the traffic counts that we conducted.
Did you evaluate existing traffic conditions as part of the study?
Yes,
And is that reflected in your report?
it is.
And where is that?
On figure 2, we show the existing traffic counts on the date of the day the counts were performed.
And did you determine the current average daily traffic for Apple Butter Road and Shimersville roads in this report?
Yes,
And where is that in your report?
that is on page 4.
And where did you get that information?
The information from for the ADTs on the state routes was obtained from PennDOT's traffic information repository website.
Did you analyze site distance as part of this report?
Yes,
Where did you look at the site distance?
we measure the site distance at the existing landfill driveway on Apple Butter Road, and also on another existing driveway on the eastern limits of the property to Apple Butter Road.
What was that second location that you looked at?
The second location was an existing driveway on the eastern limits of the landfill property.
Is that being used at all to your knowledge?
No,
And is that being proposed to be used as part of the Phase 5 expansion to your knowledge?
no,
But you just looked at it because it was there and on the property?
yes.
And looking at the site distance measurements and doing that site and distance analysis, what did you conclude?
We concluded that the existing driveway to Apple Butter Road for the landfill meets or exceeds all the minimum and preferred intersection site distance on Apple Butter Road. Also, the existing driveway on the eastern limits of the property that's not being used meets the minimum site distance criteria as well.
So that just in the future, if there was any desire to use that as an access, there was an evaluation of that site distance?
Yes.
What would the landfill have to do if they wanted to use that as an access point?
It would have to go through the highway occupancy permit process through PennDOT.
So would it have a separate HOP than the one that you identified earlier?
Yes.
So in reading your report, there's a lot of discussion about peak hours for morning and evening. What is that? What are you looking at when you talk about peak hours for the morning and evening?
When we do the capacity analysis, we try and look at the worst cases or the highest volume scenarios. For the commuter peak hours, those typically fall in 7 to 9 a.m. And the PM commuter peak hour typically falls in the 4 to 6 p.m. range.
And are those weekdays?
Yes, those are on average weekdays.
Are the peak hours for landfill traffic the same as general commuter hours?
For this particular property, the AM peak hour typically coincides with the commuting peak hour. However, the landfill closes at 4 p.m., so there really isn't much traffic other than maybe employees leaving during the commuter peak hour.
Did you do traffic counts as part of this analysis?
Yes.
When were they performed?
They were performed on Tuesday, November 1st of 2022 from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
And are those counts reflected in your report?
Yes.
And where are they in your report?
They are in Appendix A.
Did you analyze trip generation and distribution as part of your analysis?
Yes.
How did you do that?
We compared the landfill traffic that we counted at the driveway location to the actual volume intake that the landfill experienced on the day the counts were performed. And we proportionally increased that volume by 27% to get us to the 1,800 maximum permitted volume.
And can you, just looking at your report, walk us through that analysis? It's in table 5.
Sure. So on the date that the counts were performed, we observed 189 vehicles entering and exiting the site for a total of 378 trips. Each vehicle generates 2 trips, one entering, one exiting. We applied our 27% growth factor to get to the 1,800 maximum permitted tonnage, and applied that to the traffic volumes, which would increase the 189 vehicles to 240 vehicles on a daily basis, for a net increase of 51 vehicles on an average weekday.
And you used the maximum daily volume that the site is permitted when you were doing those calculations, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you account for other kinds of vehicles coming in and out of the landfill other than the waste trucks in this analysis?
For the trip generation, we applied it to all vehicles entering and exiting the landfill.
So, apologies if you just testified to this, but I want the record to be clear. How many additional trips resulted from using the maximum daily volume rather than the average daily volume number?
The difference between the observed volumes
Yes, sorry, thank you for correcting me.
and the maximum was a increase in 51 vehicles or 102 trips.
Can you describe for us the results for each of those study periods? I think it's in table 1.
Sure. For each of the 2 intersections, Apple Butter Road and the landfill driveway, and Apple Butter Road and Chambersville Road, for both the AM and PM peak hour and each of the 3 scenarios that I described earlier, we performed a capacity analysis. We took the traffic volumes, all the traffic data from the counts, and put it into Synchro, which is a software we use to calculate delays or levels of service, and also to calculate queues at intersections. Going through our analysis, the intersection of Apple Butter Road and the landfill driveway will operate at acceptable levels of service, which is the average delay for either the intersection as a whole on average or an approach. The intersection will operate at level service A, which is the best. And the individual movements will operate at level service B or better. And the level of service is rated from A through F, A being the best, F being the worst, or over capacity. And that is for both AM and PM for Apple Butter and the landfill driveway. At the intersection of Apple Butter Road and Shimersville Road during the AM peak hour, the intersection as a whole operates at level service A. The worst turning movement, which is the westbound left, is a level service C. During the PM peak hour, the intersection as a whole operates at a level service A, and the worst movement, which is the westbound left of Apple Butter Road onto Shimersville, operates at a level service E in existing conditions.
Okay, and so level service E sounds low. Tell me about why there's a level of service E at that intersection.
The level of service E is again, it's attributed to an average delay range. Level of service D is typically the lowest acceptable level of service. Once you get into level of service E or F, those movements or intersections become areas that you want to keep an eye on. In this case, it's in the level of service E in existing conditions, and it doesn't change in the future.
And are there criteria in terms of if one wanted to inquire as to how to raise the level of service there? Are there criteria that PennDOT applies to determine what improvements would be permissible at that intersection?
Sure, you can investigate any number of capacity adding improvements. From my experience with that particular intersection, the most logical one would be to signalize the intersection.
But do intersection volumes meet the PennDOT criteria for signalization at this intersection?
They do not.
And the level of service at this PM peak hour is the peak hour in the PM for general commuting, right?
Correct.
I think you testified earlier that that is not the peak PM hour for traffic from the Bethlehem Landfill, is that correct?
Correct.
What is an auxiliary lane warrant analysis?
It's analysis that we do to evaluate whether or not a separate left or right turn lane would be warranted at an intersection or driveway approach.
Did you do such an analysis here as part of this study?
Yes, we evaluated left and right turn entering volumes at the landfill driveway, and neither of those criteria are satisfied.
You testified a bit earlier that you evaluated crash data from PennDOT for Apple Butter Road, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
We requested crash data from PennDOT for the last 5 years that were available, which were the years including 2016 through 2021. We evaluated the crash data from Shimersville Road to the eastern limits of the landfill driveway to see if there were any correctable crash patterns, or we did not see any correctable crash patterns based on our analysis.
Do you know if there are any planned roadway improvements for either Apple Butter Road or Shimersville Road? Did you look into that as part of your analysis?
Yes, we did take a look at PennDOT's transportation improvement plan for their 4 and 12-year plans. The only thing that we saw was there is a planned roadway resurfacing sometime in 2029 for Apple Butter Road.
And where is that information available?
It's on the PennDOT Transportation Improvement Plan website.
Did you review the roadway conditions as part of this analysis?
Yes.
That review on page 10 of your report?
Yes.
And can you just describe for us here today what your assessment of the roadway conditions was?
Sure. Based on our review of Apple Butter Road, roadway conditions, pavement markings, and painted paint legend markings, as well as the sign location conditions, and those proximities of the proximity of obstructions to the roadway appear to be acceptable. Pavement condition itself seemed to be in good condition. The roadway has an average lane width on the road of 11 feet with variable shoulders from 0 to 5 feet. Again, those are generally in good condition. There were 2 areas we noted east of the existing Apple Butter and Bethlehem Landfill driveway, where there appears to be some alligator cracking on the shoulder, which appears to be from a drainage issue. But other than that, it appeared to be operating and designed as needed.
Did you ultimately draw conclusions about the project from a traffic perspective as a result of all of the analyses that you described today?
Yes.
And are those conclusions on page 11 of your report?
Yes.
And if you would please just, are those all of the conclusions that you drew from your analysis?
Yes.
And what are those conclusions?
That there are no notable increases, which is greater than 10 seconds in delay for the overall intersection levels of service at the study area intersections. All queues are expected to remain identical to existing conditions. The landfill operating at the maximum permitted daily intake volume would result in 102 new weekday trips or 51 vehicles, 12 new AM peak hour trips, and 2 new PM peak hour trips based upon the way intake data and counts at the existing site. Also, all movements at all intersections are expected to operate no worse than existing levels of service, even with the additional traffic from the development at maximum daily intake. And we also noted the westbound left at the Shimersville Road and Apple Butter Road intersection operates at level of service E in existing conditions and will continue to operate in the same manner in the future. All movements at the existing site driveway are expected to operate at level of service B or better. And finally, that the study shows that traffic for the Bethlehem landfill can be adequately accommodated by the surrounding roadway network.
Do you have an opinion as to whether the access to and from the landfill is suitable and adequate to accommodate the Phase 5 expansion?
I believe it is.
Based on the analysis that you performed as outlined in your report?
Yes, based on the analysis, the capacity analysis, and also our field view.
Do you think the Phase 5 expansion will result in any new or different impacts on highway traffic and safety than those impacts that exist with the current landfill operation?
No.
That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Aztec, do you have cross?
I do.
All right, you may proceed.
I do. So, Mr. Kramer, when you were discussing the trucks, now, were they tractor-trailer trucks that you were describing?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Wait, the truck traffic from I-78 onto Shimersville, onto 412 to Shimersville and Apple Butter, are those those tractor-trailer trucks filled with garbage?
If you're referring to the haul route, I assume that the haul route is for larger trucks like tractor trailers, yes.
What is the haul route for regular garbage trucks? Is there a haul route designated?
I'm not aware of any restrictions on regular trash trucks.
I see. So where do the regular trash trucks come from?
I think he just testified that he wasn't aware of that.
Thank you very much. May I continue with my cross-examination?
Yeah,
I don't
you
have to
can-
be
go ahead.
reminded of what I asked.
Go ahead. You can answer that.
So where do the trash trucks come from? What roads do they use?
Wherever they're coming from residential pickups,
What roads do they use to access this site?
Apple Butter Road.
Only Apple Butter Road. They all start and end on Apple Butter Road.
I can't speak to where they start.
How do they get to Apple Butter Road? What roads do they use to get to Apple Butter Road?
All the roads in Lower Saucon Township.
Well, there must be some intersections that Apple Butter Road connects with that trash trucks will have to access to get to the entrance of this facility. So what intersections of Apple Butter Road do trash trucks use?
They can use Apple Butter in Shimersville or any intersection on Apple Butter Road to the east.
What other intersections are there on Apple Butter to the east?
We did not evaluate any.
Do any of those, and do you have a map in your study to show those intersections to the east on Apple Butter that may be the points through which trash trucks travel?
We have a very broad-scale map in Figure 1.
So can you identify any intersections within a 2-mile radius, 3-mile radius of the subject landfill where trash trucks may be traveling?
The only roadways I see on my map here from our study that are visible is Severn Lane and Sherry Hill Road.
Are you familiar with the broader map, or you didn't bring that with you by a chance?
I don't have a broader map of the area.
So then we could assume then that your study was solely limited to two intersections. One, the driveway with Apple Butter, and second, Shimersville and Apple Butter, correct?
Those are the two intersections we analyzed.
And
yes.
that your study excluded trash trucks coming from any other directions,
I'm
correct?
going to object to that question.
What's the objection?
I don't think he testified that his study excluded trucks from coming from any other direction. I think
I agree with that, but that's what he should answer. Can you answer the question?
Our study included all trucks and all traffic to and from the landfill.
But not from an easterly direction on Apple Butter, correct?
We did not evaluate any other intersections east of the landfill.
All right, so then the study does not include any traffic east of the landfill, is that correct?
Our study shows all traffic coming into the landfill from Apple Butter Road to the east. We counted all those volumes coming, all the traffic coming from the east into the landfill.
And
That's
how many-
reflected in our counts.
And how many current trips are there coming east, and how many current trips are coming from the west?
If you look at Figure 2 in our study for the existing conditions, there were 2 vehicles entering the landfill from the east in the morning and none in the PM peak hour.
No, I'm talking about all day now, I'm just not the morning peak hour. Do you have a total truck count of vehicles coming from the east?
During the 12 hours of traffic counts we conducted at the landfill driveway to Apple Butter Road, there were a total of 23 vehicles entering the site.
Can you
From what direction?
Can I just get a little bit of clarification of what we're looking at so I can view the table?
In Appendix A, the very first traffic count sheet you'll see is for Apple Butter Road and the Bethlehem Landfill driveway. On the second sheet, in the middle column, that's for the westbound right turn into the landfill driveway.
Okay, thank you.
So how many trucks are coming eastbound and how many trucks are coming westbound on a daily basis?
Based on the count data, there were 23 coming from the east and 166 from the west.
And those
That's
are
total vehicles.
total vehicles. Did you break it down into trucks? And did you break it down between trash trucks and tractor trailer trucks?
The count data breaks down vehicles. The terminology on the count sheet is lights, mediums, and articulated trucks.
Articulated would be what?
Tractor trailers. Or anything with an axle, I assume. I can't speak on the size. But there were 49 lights coming from the west, 9 lights coming from the east, 63 mediums coming from the west, 13 mediums coming from the east, and 54 articulated from the west and 1 from the east.
What is the nature of the roadway to the east of the entrance on Apple Butter Road? Can you describe the roadway for us?
Sure, the Apple Butter Road to the east continues to have a similar cross-section as it does in front of the landfill.
Is the road straight? Does it contain curves? Is it 2-lane? Is there a center line? Describe, from a technical point of view, the type of roadway that it is. As a traffic engineer, explain that to us, please.
It's a 2-lane road with,
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Don't be distracted.
it's a 2-lane road to the east, just as it is in front of the landfill. And I'm not speaking to any specific distance, but approximate east of the landfill. 2 lanes, nominal shoulders, like 0 to 3 feet.
Nominal shoulders. What does that mean? That means there's no place to pull off, really.
You couldn't pull fully off of the road.
Okay. Go on. Continue.
There are some vertical and horizontal curves, different in varying degrees.
And what are the grades?
We didn't evaluate the grades of the roadway east of the landfill.
Well, you drove it, I'm sure. What was, can you provide an estimate? There's a significant grade on eastbound, is there not?
Objection, he just testified that he didn't evaluate that as part of this analysis.
I'll take that. All right, so you didn't evaluate the grades eastbound then, is that correct?
Not for the whole roadway, no.
Well, any of the roadway eastbound or east from the landfill? Did you evaluate it at all? I don't see a description of it, that's why I'm asking.
The only grades we took were at the approaches to the landfill driveway locations.
So you say you did the counts on Tuesday.
Correct.
There's physical people out there clicking vehicles? Is that the way you did it? Or was this some sort of computerized artificial intelligence testing?
The consultant that we used to collect the traffic data used cameras.
I see. So there was not, the counts were not done personally, is that correct?
Correct.
And you didn't do the counts, correct?
Not personally, no.
Your firm didn't do the counts.
Correct.
Who did the counts?
Imperial Traffic and Data Collection.
And did they provide a certification to you with regard to their methodology in doing the counts?
What kind of certification?
You know, certification that they followed acceptable engineering practices, describing the practices, identifying the employees that were involved in the setups, the nature of the equipment used, and the training and skill level of those who may have had to watch whatever videos were taken, where the cameras were located, what direction the cameras were located, and the hard data that supported the data that you relied upon in the preparation of your transportation impact analysis.
We were given the hard data, but we weren't given any kind of certification.
Do we know what classification manuals they may have used in defining the different types of vehicles?
As I described earlier, the traffic counts were broken down into lights, medium trucks, and large articulated trucks.
Were you provided the manual that were used by the counters to provide that breakdown? In other words, what criteria were used to define or identify each of those particular categories?
I don't know off the top of my head what those categories are, but I do know that they follow the AASHTO vehicle classifications.
But we don't know what they used. Nor do we know the training of the people who did those counts and provided you with the data upon which you rely, correct?
Not at the moment, I don't know.
Okay, so let's talk about why Tuesday. Why Tuesday?
When we conduct traffic counts for studies, we typically are looking for the average weekday. One that is not influenced by holidays, unusual events, things of that nature. So we don't do Monday or Friday counts unless there is a specific reason related to the use or site. So we schedule counts on any Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday on a regular week.
Did you examine the landfill reports to determine what the daily delivery tonnage was on a daily basis? And in other words, did you examine the landfill reports to determine what the daily tonnage deliveries were on Monday versus Tuesday versus Wednesday versus Thursday versus Friday?
No.
You know what the busiest trash delivery day is at that landfill?
No.
Do you know where Tuesday fits in the spectrum of Monday through Friday in terms of number of actual trips of garbage truck deliveries?
As far as our study was concerned, it didn't matter unless as long as it was on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, because we're not looking for manipulated data from the site. We're looking for the average weekday of the roadway system.
Right, but we wouldn't be looking at data that's manipulated. We'd be looking at data that had been collected and reported to DEP on every day. The landfill reports how many tons arrive, correct?
Sure.
Right, on every day, the landfill would have reports on the number of vehicles that brought those trucks, correct?
Sure.
And the sizes of those trucks and the origin of those trucks, correct?
Yeah.
So you would be able to look at actual data from the landfill to determine how many trucks came on any given day and where their origins were, correct?
Sure.
Did you do that?
We evaluated the data that was provided for the day of the counts.
No, I'm talking, yeah, it was Tuesday, what date was that?
November 1st.
Tuesday, November, that's what you know. But were you aware of the fact that you could go back to the landfill and check the DEP reports and the landfill records to determine how many vehicles were coming on any given day other than November 1? Did you know that?
We could have gotten the data.
But you didn't.
It wasn't relevant.
That's That's right, because everything depends upon what happened on November 1, 2022, correct? The counts that you relied upon were Tuesday, on a Tuesday in November, November 1st, correct?
Yes.
Now, what if I told you that, in fact, the deliveries and the tonnage was the highest on Monday? And that the numbers would be greater if we looked at counting vehicles on Monday? Would that alter the analysis because you're altering the data?
I don't know how to respond to that. What I can,
Well, if I told you that the numbers were higher on Monday, but than on Monday, there's nothing special about that other than that's the day that the garbage is picked up most frequently, and the garbage trucks roll, and the garbage trucks come into the landfill in a greater number on Monday than any other day of the week, and that your numbers for Monday would be higher. Would that in any way alter, because your baseline is different, your analysis?
the only thing it would have changed is would be how much we would be increasing the landfill traffic by, if any, if we happen to hit the maximum volume.
And the maximum, let's write that. So it would, if there were more trips, and those trips were in fact going through a intersection that is currently at level E, it might jack that level E up to a level F. Isn't that theoretically possible?
Depends on the volume.
Right.
But again,
and we don't know
to
that.
clarify your statement, it's the movement is level service E, not the intersection.
Yeah. And let's talk about movements for a second. Is it just common knowledge or common experience that trucks move slower through intersections than cars?
When they're coming from a stop,
Yeah, from a stop intersection, right. And how is the, how's Apple Butter Road and Shimersville Road signaled?
it's not signalized.
Oh, so the stop sign.
Yes,
So every truck that comes through that intersection has to stop, right?
from Apple Butter Road, yes.
Right. So every vehicle that comes through Apple Butter Road at Shimersville Road, whether it's making a left or a right or whatever direction it's going, has to stop, right?
Yes,
And if it's a truck, it takes longer to move through the intersection, correct?
sure.
And if it's a tractor-trailer truck, a tractor-trailer truck would take a little bit longer than a, let's say, a trash truck, correct?
Possibly.
Trash trucks usually, because, what's the capacity of a trash truck? How many tons are there in a trash truck?
I couldn't say.
Well, didn't you use those calculations when you backed out the number of trucks coming in based upon the average daily volume? I thought you used some sort of calculation in that regard.
Yes, the 1,800 tons, which is the maximum daily limit, is 27% higher than the 1,414 tons that were observed on the day of the counts.
And how many trucks is that, though?
According to the data we received from the landfill, is 112 vehicles.
So it's 112 vehicles a day. So you did receive data from the landfill?
From the day of the counts, yes.
Oh, but you didn't ask for data on, let's say, October 31, correct? Which would have been a Monday. You only got the data from November 1st, correct?
Yes.
So, and of the 112 trucks, how many were tractor trailers and how many were trash trucks?
I couldn't tell you from the report that they gave us. I only have weights.
All right. But I believe you said a majority of them did in fact go through that Apple Butter Road and Shimer Road intersection?
Yes,
And every one of them would have had to stop and move, correct?
westbound on Apple Butter Road at
Yeah.
Chimersville, yes.
And did your study consider other developments in the lower Saucon Township area?
There were no specific developments that we included in our analysis, but we did include the PennDOT growth background factor for to account for stuff in the region.
That's theoretical, correct?
It's a real number.
Right. Did you look at the real number from Lehigh Valley Planning Commission? Did you look at the Lehigh Valley real number projections on increased population growth within the lower Saucon area?
No,
Did you look at the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission data with regard to commercial industrial development in the lower Saucon area?
no,
Did you look at the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission data with regard to development of commercial industrial facilities in that area?
no,
Did you look at the data with regard to traffic through the boroughs of Hellertown and Freemansburg?
no.
Do you know what the impact is on this in the boroughs of Freemansburg and Hellertown?
We didn't analyze those areas.
Do you know if there are any trash trucks that run down the main streets of Freemansburg and Hellertown?
I'm not sure.
Do you know what traffic looks like during peak hour on the main streets of Freemansburg and Hellertown?
I'm going to object. I think that the witness has already testified to the scope of his investigation, and Mr. Aztec is continuing to ask questions about whether he looked at things outside of the scope of the investigation. So I think this is asked and answered.
Well, thank you. I thought you was going to say I was badgering the witness, but what he didn't look at is exactly the point that I'm trying to make. Thank you for taking that.
I
point.
understand.
Yeah, thank you. I figured you would.
Do you have any other questions, though, related to areas outside of the study area?
I
All right.
think I've beat up that one. So we talked about average daily volume, and where did you get those numbers from? Average daily volume?
We received the average daily volumes on Apple Butter and Shimersville Road from PennDOT's website.
I see. And do you know when those counts were?
We looked up the data in 2022, but I don't know when the counts were done for that.
Let's, forgive me for my naivete, but let's look at table 3 on page 4 for a second, and maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing, maybe I'm looking at the right thing. Tell me. Table 3, ADT, what does that mean?
Average daily traffic.
And so table 3 says average daily traffic of study roadways, correct?
Yes.
Your table says roadway, Apple Butter Road. Current ADT. What year was the count?
I don't have that information.
All right. So we don't know if it was last year, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. We don't know when the counts actually occurred, correct? It's all theoretical, right?
No, it's based off actual counts.
But you don't know when they were.
Not exactly, no.
All right. You don't know when in terms of year or when in terms of what day, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, as part of your analysis, I understand you hired a firm to provide you with data for November 1, 2022, and then you reached out to other sources and used your skill and expertise to come up with the conclusions that you have provided us in your report, correct?
What sources?
I don't know, you tell, sources, PennDOT, I guess, right? PennDOT.
We collected whatever data was relevant for the study from any number of PennDOT resources.
From PennDOT resources, correct?
Depending on what it was, yes.
No. Any other sources other than PennDOT?
Other than the traffic counts and PennDOT,
No, right.
correct.
Did you, and tell me if this is even within the scope of your professional responsibilities, but did you interview any of those drivers or interview those neighbors who typically drive on Apple Butter Road and go through the intersections of Apple Butter and Chambersville or any other intersection off of Apple Butter?
That's not something we typically do for traffic analysis.
So there was no anecdotal analysis of what the driver perception or driver experience was on those roads or at those intersections, correct?
We didn't look for, we didn't speak with any about that.
So you didn't talk to the people, right?
He's already asked this question
you-
3 times, I'm going to
did you-
object.
Did you?
Sustained.
I will ask another question. Did you talk to the truck drivers who actually traverse the roadways or go through the intersections?
No,
Did you talk to the municipal officials in either Freemansburg or Hellertown with regard to what their experience was with regard to the trash trucks that are accessing this facility?
no.
Now, we got from, I guess, somewhere, a DEP review of this particular landfill back in 2002. Now, granted, that was 20 years ago, but it contains analysis of a variety of issues within the context of an environmental assessment. And one of the issues that they bring up, and I'm asking you this question only to determine whether or not it was within your purview, was whether as a traffic impact engineer, you concern yourself at all with the potential harms of trucks not being properly enclosed, leaking loads,
I'm going to object
truck
here.
safety inspect violations, overweight trucks, and/or illegal parking of trucks. Does that fall within the area of your expertise study?
I'd like to object because if Mr. Aztec is reading from a document related to the landfill, I think that we have a right to see a copy of that document.
Because I'm referring to a DEP analysis
Okay.
of your client.
If the objection is that she would like to see the document and you're willing to provide it, then go ahead. I think it's a good time. Our court reporter has suggested it might be a good time to take a break. I think it probably is a good time. This will give you an opportunity, Ms. Garber, to take a look at that exhibit as well. So we'll take 5 minutes, okay? Thank you. Okay, Mr. Aztec, are you ready?
I am. That last question that I posed to you, is it within your purview and part of your responsibilities in the preparation of a transportation impact analysis to address the issues that I had identified in the previous attempted question which involved DEP pointing out that there were known or potential harms involving trucks being improperly enclosed, leaking loads, truck safety violations, overweight trucks, and/or illegal parking.
Those are all out of our scope.
Sorry, those are all what? Out of our.
Out of our scope.
And is it within your scope to determine whether or not the existing roadway is capable of handling the volume of trucks, tractor trailers and trash trucks, with regard to the wear and tear upon the roadways? Is that within the scope of your transportation impact analysis?
We don't do any kind of pavement design or anything like that.
Do you do any pavement analysis to determine whether or not the tractor trailers and trash trucks operating on these two-lane roads cause damage or impact on the wear and tear of the pavement?
No.
Would that be something that would require additional analysis and study by those who have engineering expertise other than yours?
I would be able to do something like that, but it would be more involved. It would require additional analysis that we don't typically do in a analysis like this. It's more of a design.
So you weren't asked to determine what, if any, wear and tear there might be upon the existing roadway or what the condition of the existing roadway was, correct?
We did report on the condition of the existing roadway, but we did not make any comments or otherwise on the continued wear and tear.
But there is certainly well, strike that. You don't know how these roads were constructed in terms of depth and when they were constructed and when they were most recently repaved or repaired, do you?
We do have access to PennDOT's pavement history website, which gives some information, but the only way to really know what pavement structure is out there is to do a pavement core.
And that was not done here, either access PennDOT's pavement history or do a core.
Correct, we did not do that.
Now, were you aware and have you examined any transportation compliance plans that may have been prepared and filed with regard to this particular landfill?
We did not review any, no.
Are you aware of, strike that, what is a transportation compliance plan? TCP.
I think that I'm going to object because the witness just testified that he didn't review any such plan, and this is beyond the scope of direct, so I'm not sure that this is an appropriate line of questioning.
Yeah, but he could call him back up here as a witness in his case, so it's relevant. I'm going to allow it. Go ahead.
Let's start with what is a TCP, Transportation Compliance Plan?
As it relates to DEP,
Yes.
we did not do one.
No, the question was, what is it?
We didn't do one. It's irrelevant to our analysis.
I'm not talking about your analysis now. I'm talking about what does a transportation compliance plan consist of? Have you ever, do you know what it is? Not one with regard to this property. Generically, what is a transportation compliance plan?
I assume a plan for any vehicles using the site and the routes they have to take.
Okay. Do you know what a neighborhood protection analysis is? You don't have to look over at Ms. Garber.
I'm not looking at Ms. Garber.
She doesn't know the answer to the
Again,
question
we
either.
did not perform one, nor is it relevant to our study.
That's okay. I understand that's your testimony. If I told you that the landfill 20 years ago was had submitted a transportation compliance plan, TCP, litter patrol plan, and neighborhood protection analysis in response to public concern about truck traffic. You're not familiar with that at all, correct?
No.
Were you made aware by your client that in response to public concern about truck traffic to its facility via the Freemansburg Bridge, the landfill had supplied a transportation compliance plan?
No, I was not.
Were you made aware by your client of concerns raised by the borough of Freemansburg with regard to truck traffic, trash truck and tractor trailer traffic on the Freemansburg Bridge?
No.
Were you made aware of any concerns by other local municipalities with regard to the truck traffic?
Not other than what I've seen in the news.
Were you aware that back in 2002, the traffic compliance plan required all traffic to use I-78 to Route 412 to Shimersville Road to Apple Butter Road, except for collection vehicles servicing Freemansburg and surrounding communities? Were you aware of that?
I'm going to object because I think he already asked this witness if he knew about any traffic compliance plan, and he already testified that he doesn't.
Okay,
That's
very well. Thank you.
All right, sustained.
Oh, yeah. I'm referring to BLC 80, the Transportation Impact Analysis, page 4, the top of page 4. Land uses along approach route. You make the observation in your report that no other cultural, historic, environmental, or recreational sensitive areas exist along the approach route. Is there any reason why you included that sentence in this report?
Other than we're not aware of any.
Then why would you put it in there? Like, why is it your concern to mention cultural, historic, or environmental or recreational areas?
Because we're describing the adjacent land uses.
Would cultural, historic, environmental, or recreation areas, if they exist, have been of concern for you?
They would have been described in the approach route if they did exist.
Why?
Because we're describing the area along the approach route.
But why do you identify those rather than other types of uses?
I don't,
Like-
see,
like
I don't see
say-
how it matters which resources or uses we're describing is relevant here.
So you don't think any of those are relevant then?
I didn't say they're not relevant. I said I don't understand how this question is relevant to our report.
Let me be the judge of that or someone else.
All right,
okay?
stop. Let's
you know-
not argue back and forth. We're not going to get anywhere if we argue instead of asking questions and answering questions. All right.
What was so I'm going to ask this question. What was the relevance for you to put those factors in this report?
Because you typically would describe the uses and adjacent areas of an approach route in a study for a landfill,
Why?
because that's what we do with the criteria for DEP.
Why? You do it just because they want it? This isn't a report for DEP. So why? Oh, so you say you're putting it there because DEP is concerned about it? Or you're putting it there because it factors in your transportation impact analysis? That if those uses were near a landfill, or the access to the landfill, or a transportation route to a landfill, they would have an impact. They would be impacted.
I think to answer your question, as best as I can, for landfill studies, for traffic studies, for example, we typically follow municipal ordinances and PennDOT criteria. For a landfill study, we typically would follow what we require by PennDOT and also aspects that DEP would want to see when those are eventually submitted to DEP. So that would be the reason why it was included.
So they are relevant factors.
Things that we would have to describe in our study.
So now your study and your impact analysis is predicated upon a certain amount of tonnage, is that correct?
It's based on the maximum daily permitted intake, yes.
And if the maximum daily intake increases, then you would then be required to do a revised transportation impact analysis, correct?
Yes.
So would it be safe to say that your entire testimony is predicated upon the fact that you are relying upon the same volume intake as currently exists, correct?
The study is based on the maximum limit being maintained.
As of now, correct?
Yes.
And you also assumed the current hours of operation, correct?
Yes.
And you also assumed the current driveway location, correct?
Yes.
And you also assumed the designated haul route, correct?
For the larger trucks, yes.
And you also based your report on the count from Imperial on November 1, 2022, and the data that you were able to collect from PennDOT. And your conclusions are theoretical conclusions based upon the data that you received.
I'm going to object to the characterization of that question.
It's cross-examination?
I'll overrule it. You can answer it.
It's not theoretical. Our conclusion is based on our calculations of the data that we received.
Theoretically based upon the data that you've described.
It's real data, it's not theoretical data.
Well, there's only data from November 1, 2022. You know, there's 365 days in a year, and we're talking about a landfill that's supposed to be projected out 20 to 30 years. So it's theoretical when it comes to 10 years from now, is it not?
It's an assumption on growth rates and things like that. But those
That's right. It's an assumption based upon theoretical calculations that you are using to project a future that is uncertain. Isn't that correct, sir?
It's not a prediction.
It's a projection.
Yes.
What's the difference between a projection and a prediction?
A projection is an estimate.
Okay. But there's no certainty because the factors that lead to the conclusions may alter over time, correct?
I'm not sure how to answer that question, but what I can say is that traffic volumes fluctuate year to year, day to day. The intake at the landfill can fluctuate day to day. We are looking at an approximation for the future.
Thank you. I'll leave the rest of the questions to Mr. Corrier.
All right, thank you, Mr. Azte. Mr. Corrier, you have questions?
Just a few, yes.
All right, you may proceed.
Hello, Mr. Kramer. I represent Hellertown and Northampton counties. I just have a few questions. I represent Hellertown and Northampton County. I just have a few questions relative to traffic in the study that you performed. My first question is, where are the count? Did your firm send out counters to do the traffic counts?
No, we hired Imperial to do the counts.
Okay. And were they stationed along the 78 interchange?
We didn't count at the 78 interchange.
So was the first count would be on Shelmersville Road?
Shelmersville and Apple Butter, yes.
Okay, so there were counters there. Were there counters actually at the landfill as well?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things on behalf of the county is there is and we'll introduce this on the other side of the case, but there's a contract about servicing in-house or in-county waste, and there's a time limit in which the trucks have to wait at the site. And did you notice anything, or did the counters notice anything in regard to stacking in terms of the trucks waiting at the intersection? Did you, waiting at the landfill to deliver their product?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. And is it my understanding, based on your analysis, that the Phase 5 increase is going to lead to 102 additional trips per day? Is that the ultimate conclusion?
No, the conclusion is that if the landfill on any given day operates at its maximum intake, it would generate approximately 102 additional trips than the day that we did the counts at the landfill.
Okay, can that be extrapolated to be 102 trips each day for the week?
I'm not sure how often they're allowed to go up to the, there's an average daily volume, and then there's a maximum. We were just looking at the worst case scenario in the event that it occurs.
Right, understood. So is that what the data is telling us, that there would be 102 if they reach maximum capacity? Obviously, if they don't, it would be less. But if they reach maximum capacity with the increase and keeping it within the maximum capacity, are what you're estimating 100 additional 2 trips per day?
An additional 102 trips than the day of the counts, yes.
Okay. And is it my understanding that when you say that there's a truck or a haul route, that is for the maximum weighted trucks? Is that fair to say?
Yes, the larger trucks.
What are the weights for the large trucks? Do you define a large truck by weight?
No, we typically look at length.
Okay. And when you're saying, I think you classified the trucks between large, medium, and light, can you tell me what those lengths are between those 3 different vehicles?
I would have to look up the AASHTO vehicle classifications that were included in each to give you that.
Okay. But does the trip count include large trucks, light trucks, and medium trucks that were being taken to the landfill?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know, and only the large trucks have to follow the truck traffic route according to PennDOT, is that correct?
I believe that's DEP. My understanding is it's for the larger trucks, not the smaller distribution trucks.
Okay. And the smaller or medium or light distribution trucks, they're permitted to take different routes, is that fair to say?
It's my understanding.
Has there ever been any studies that would say what routes those trucks are likely to take?
I think that would be up to the collection company.
Do you know, is this the route that we presented on the exhibit that was marked as BLC 79? Is that the quickest route from the 78 interchange to the Bethlehem landfill? Are there other routes that you looked at?
We did not look at changing it, no.
Okay. Did you have any discussions with any borough officials about issues with how to get there through using GPS?
No.
Okay. Did you have any discussions with the borough officials about whether or not they received truck traffic and issues with truck traffic on
No.
their municipality?
No.
Okay. Is Shimersville Road, is that all, the area that was studied, that was in Lower Saucon Township? Is that-
Shimersville Road's in the city of Bethlehem.
City of Bethlehem? And what about Apple Bottom Road? What was the municipality?
The western limits are in the city of Bethlehem, and the rest is Lower Saucon.
And none of the trip counts that were taken by the firm that you retained were within the borough of Hellertown, is that correct?
Correct.
Just 1 second.
Sure. Take your time.
You indicated, I believe if I'm reading your report correctly, that the additional tonnage would go from, assuming worst case scenario, 1,223 tons to 1,414 tons. Is that fair to say? Is that what you were indicating in your report?
Could you repeat that?
What does your report indicate, and I think it was on to help you, was that the tonnage was going to rise from 1,223 tons per day to 1,414 tons per day, and I'm looking at page 6, making sure that I'm sort of informing you correctly.
The 1,414 tons was the actual tonnage on the data, the counts that we did.
Okay.
We applied a 27% increase to get to that 1,800 maximum.
Okay. And do we know though if so you're saying it would be additional 102 trips per day, which I guess is 56 trucks, am I thinking correctly?
51.
51. Do you know what is the maximum tonnage or what tonnage a particular truck, one truck brings to the facility?
Based on the weight data that we received, the highest received was 25 to 26 tons.
Okay, and was that calculation used to factor into this 27% increase when you were doing that?
No, we just applied the 27% growth factor, which is the difference between 1414 and 1800. So that assumes that your average, your distribution of vehicles using the landfill is going to stay the same. You're effectively increasing all of them at the same rate. So what we could have done in a different manner, it would have been a little more complicated, but if we assumed it was all large trucks, it would be fewer vehicles because you have that tonnage being met sooner. So we just assumed, just to make things simple and assume, again, a distribution of what the landfill is experiencing. We assume the same distribution percentage of vehicle size and average weight of the landfill.
And so, just so I can wrap my head around the 27% increase, there's not a direct relation between 27% increase in truck traffic. Is that correct?
The 27% increase is related, again, to the difference in weight, but what was realized in the limit. So 1,800 tons is 27% more than 1414.
Okay.
But we apply that to all vehicles throughout the day for the landfill to get these totals.
Okay. And does that factor in any way to the calculation of the 102 additional trips per day? Is that related to that at all?
Yeah, that's how we got to the 102.
And how is that? What's the correlation there?
Between 102 trips a day.
Well, is there a correlation between the 27% issue and the 102 trips?
Yeah, the 102 trips is 20% more than what was realized
Okay.
during the day.
That's what I was getting at.
Yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all the attorneys for today, so,
I think I have a couple of questions
Okay.
to follow up here.
all right, Mr. Aztec, go ahead.
Just very briefly, did you get a count on the trucks that are not bringing in trash? Or,
We counted all vehicles that were entering or exiting the site, whether they were bringing in trash or deliveries for the landfill.
yeah, but that was November 1, 2022. I'm talking about any other outside source for data collection on trucks that were not bringing in trash, such as cover soil or cover material or other trucks transporting equipment or materials necessary for the ongoing management of the landfill itself. Do you count those?
If they were delivering on the day of the counts, yes, they were
But
included.
how about any of the other 364 days in the year?
We're not analyzing every day of the year.
Okay, we're only dealing with one day. And the same would be true of trucks that may be hauling leachate. You ever count those?
Again, if they were going to the site on the day of the counts, they would have been included in those.
Do you know whether there was any leachate transport on that particular day?
I don't know.
Do you know what days of the week leachate transport occurs?
I don't.
Do you know when leachate transport occurs?
No, I don't.
Do you know
I'm
what kind
gonna-
of trucks are used for leachate transport?
Okay,
I'm going to
sustained.
object, thank you.
Well, it's directly relevant because all this is predicated upon waste transport and nothing else. So we don't know what the counts are for any other day of the year other than November 1, 2022, nor has there been any data collection with regard to other traffic with regard to the facility.
But
which-
this
which
witness doesn't
undermines-
have that information. He's already testified
and the purpose
to
and
that.
the purpose of the cross-examination is to establish that to undermine the credibility of the entire testimony, the entire opinion, because he can't project if he doesn't have all of the data. So if there are transports, if there are trucks that he didn't consider, it undermines the credibility of it, if not the relevance of it, because it doesn't accurately represent what is happening here.
I agree with your argument, okay? But you've asked those questions, he's answered them, I understand the point,
Okay, as long as we concede that the record is absolutely clear, that the only thing we've counted are maybe cars on that day
I'm
and
gonna-
trash trucks.
I'm going to object to that. There's no concession. The record will speak for itself.
Well, then I'm trying to build that record.
Well, you're going to be able to make arguments, but that's not what we're doing right now. So, I understand. I mean, we could get into every type of truck under the sun and ask him questions about that, but the issue is,
I'm not talking about flower delivery trucks. I'm talking about trucks that typically would service this facility. We know that there's leachate transport. We don't know, and I'm just trying to establish that, and maybe I've already established the basic question. If the answer to the last question is, I did not, or I was not aware that there were trucks coming and going with regard to ancillary services to landfill, including cover and other materials or leachate in or out, and they were not part of the data collection, then I am fine with that. Would that be your testimony if I were allowed to ask you that question?
I'm going to object to that question. That
on
was
the same basis.
on the same basis, and because unless we want to read back what the testimony is, that characterization of the testimony.
Well, it's cross. Can you answer that?
I can say that any vehicles of any kind for any deliveries, if they were delivering or going to or from the landfill on the day of the counts, they were included in our analysis. One thing we did not do, based on information that I was received from the landfill, is that they will be able to use on-site fill and won't need third-party deliveries of fill from other sources. We did not take any reductions in truck traffic for those types of things.
I'm satisfied.
Okay.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. All right, Now would be the time. If you have party status and you wish to ask questions, I'm going to ask you to come up to the microphone and, of course, state your name, address, and then you may proceed with questions. Yes, sir. Come on up.
My name is Russ Sutton.
You got to push harder on the button.
Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong thing. My name's Russ Sutton, and I live in Steel City. And the truck traffic has a major impact.
All right.
A question.
Mr. Sutton.
Okay, I'll start over again. How many trucks a day do you say go into the dump?
Sorry, sir, could you repeat that?
Oh, yeah, how many trucks a day go in the dump? And with the expansion, what's the total amount of trucks that you think will go into the dump?
Based on the data that we received, there were, of all the traffic going to the landfill, 112 were there delivering fill.
So 112 total, not just one way,
No, that was 112 vehicles were weighed.
weighed in, but that was just going in, but they have to come out too, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that'd be double that amount truck traffic, correct?
That would be the number of trips you're
The
describing.
trips, right, okay. Was that road designed for that kind of traffic?
I don't know.
Okay, do you realize that a road has hairpin turns that even two tractor trailers together can barely pass on that road? Because it has hairpin turns and there's no shoulders on that road, because I live in that area.
All right. Be cautious about testifying.
Oh, right.
Right? Because now you're telling us where you live, you're telling us different information, but you're not asking a question.
Oh, okay, do you feel the shoulders on that road is adequate for somebody to get off?
I believe I mentioned earlier that you can't fully turn off of the road with the shoulders that are provided.
And did your traffic analysis, are you just strictly truck, you're not talking about railroad?
We didn't do any analysis with railroads.
Okay. Also, when you did the count, you did it on one day. Is that routine for your company just to do it on one day?
It's routine in preparing a traffic impact analysis to get a snapshot of the data, whether it's one intersection or you have a corridor. You're looking for a typical weekday where you're looking to get data to see how the motoring public typically drive.
And would it make more sense to have more days so you get a better average of the actual counts?
That would be cost prohibitive for one, in preparing traffic studies, and it's additional data that you'd have to look at.
Right, but it would provide you a better picture of what's happening as opposed to one day, correct?
If things are changing, yes, but if you go to work the same route every day during the week, your traffic patterns don't change, which is why we look at a typical weekday.
And did you look into your traffic analysis, how it impacts Steel City? The people going into Steel City on that road?
As I mentioned before, our scope was limited to Apple Butter in Shemersville and Apple Butter in the landfill.
There's only two accesses to Steel City, one over the bridge and the other one on Shimersville Road. So
What's the
my question
question?
is, did you do any analysis how that affects the people in Steel City as far as getting access to their homes with all the truck traffic?
We did not analyze anything beyond Shimersville Road, and in our projections for the additional traffic, assuming the maximum daily tonnage, all those vehicles were assumed to use the haul route going down to 78.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Anyone else that has, yes, sir, come forward. Can you state your name first?
Yes, Robert Blasco, B-L-A-S-K-O.
All right, and just for the record, Mr. Blasco, can you give us your address?
Mr. McNair, Mr. Blasco is represented by Mr. Aztec.
Okay, is that accurate, Mr. Blasco?
Yes, it is. I
Okay.
have standing. Does that not allow me to ask questions?
It does. I don't know if you were present at the last hearing. We did talk about
I can't
this.
attend them also.
Okay, so, and I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway, but we're trying to have the attorney who represents anyone ask the questions for those participants so that we're not getting questions not only from the attorney, but also from all the residents that are being represented by that council. So I'm going to give you some leeway this afternoon, since you weren't here the last time, to ask some questions, but in the future, what I'd ask is that you supply Mr. Aztec with any questions that you have, and he can ask them, okay?
That's fine.
All right, you may proceed.
Are you aware of the agreement between the landfill and the township as to a designated truck route?
I was not aware of one between the township and the landfill.
When you described the trucks that you counted November 1st, I believe you implied that you only counted the articulated trucks? Yes, no?
No, the articulated trucks, again, that was a description of the trucks in the count data. We looked at, what was described as lights, mediums, and large articulated vehicles. So the trucks would be included in the mediums and the articulated vehicles, and the lights would be smaller box trucks or personal vehicles.
So you're not aware then of the prescribed route and that the landfill trucks are supposed to be using a prescribed route?
I'm not sure how that question relates to the route and the types of trucks.
You did your study on apple butter in Shimersville and Route 412 off of 78, correct?
We did our study at Apple Butter in Shimersville and Apple Butter in the landfill. We didn't do 412.
You stated that the day that you were there were 23 trucks that came into the landfill from the east, yes?
Referencing the count data that I was explaining earlier, I mentioned there were 23 vehicles, not 23 trucks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blasco. Any other questions for this witness from members or residents with party status? Okay, I've got a few questions just to clarify a few topics. You have a question? All right, come forward, Mr. Medina.
Cesar Medina, 2594 Rillington Road, Hellertown, PA.
Oh, you may proceed.
Okay. You already been certified as an expert, present as an expert. I have a question about engineering. um, differential equations, integrations. Will more data be better than less data?
More data can always be beneficial, sure.
If you're doing the equation, and you only have one data to integrate, what will the outcome be?
When it comes to traffic, again, because we're looking at an average weekday, many drivers have identical commuting patterns and times. It doesn't, you don't benefit as much from counting multiple days in a row to try and get more data. I understand having more data, it can be a concern of not having enough. But again, we're looking at an average commuter weekday, average commuter peak hours for commuters who commute the same direction, the same route, around the same times every day. So unless there's an extenuating circumstance or event, we typically do our studies on one day of data.
Will you consider that traffic during summertime could be higher than traffic during wintertime, close to holidays?
In certain situations, PennDOT does have seasonal adjustment factors that can be used. But again, those, when you do study with seasonal adjustment factors or any kind of adjustment factor like that, it's usually something that has a substantial shift in traffic volumes. Like volumes at the shore in the summertime are much higher than they are in the wintertime. Those types of locations, you would use some kind of adjustment factor, but for a site like this, we wouldn't use any adjustment factors like that.
And as far as trucks coming from the east, exiting exit 75 from 78, do you have any knowledge of that traffic?
From 412?
From 78 coming west, exit 78 from exit 75 from Route 78, coming to the landfill that way to Apple Butter Road. You have any knowledge on your studies?
I'm not sure where. Are you referring to the 412 interchange or
Yeah, 75, exit 75 is where the fireworks are, where all the landfill
from
is.
Easton?
Yes, Morgan Hill. So there's an exit there, there's Industrial Drive, there's Burger Road, there's Lower Saucon Road, and there's Apple Butter Road, and there's the landfill. Do you have any knowledge of that traffic?
I do not know.
Would you consider that being important for the study?
It could be.
My property is on Burlington, which is coming from the other landfill. When you go down in Lower Saucon Valley, I notice wrinkles on the road.
All right, so right
The
now,
question is-
Mr. Medina, that's
Yeah.
testimony when you make statements like that.
Uh-huh.
So you can only ask questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Could super low trucks, 26 tons, cause wrinkles on the road and pavement?
There could be washboarding or rutting in the roads from high weight vehicles. It can also come from stopping. Usually see those types of characteristics in softer pavement at intersection approaches.
On an incline, on the pavement road, where will a heavy vehicle cause wrinkles on that road? Really heavy.
Again, it depends on how the roadway was designed and constructed.
Do you know the design of Lower Saucon Road, where traffic comes from to the landfill?
That's outside of our scope.
The other question is, did the landfill was notified that this counting will be taking place on November 1st?
We informed them that we were going to be doing counts in a general timeframe, and we asked them for the data, the scale data on the date that we had done the counts.
How far back were they notified that that count will be taking place that day?
I don't know if we told them exactly which day it was, just which week we were going to be doing the counts.
So you're not sure if you notified them about the day?
Again, I don't think we told them the exact date ahead of time. We requested the data from them for the date of the counts after they were done.
Okay, I had no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right. So let me try to understand one issue. The maximum tonnage is what's listed in your traffic impact study, which is exhibit ELC 80. And I think you have it as, is it 1,800?
That's the maximum daily intake, yes.
Okay. And that maximum intake could be occurring on days currently, right? That's the maximum for the existing site, correct?
Yes,
And that is proposed to be the maximum in the future, correct?
yes,
And so you have an average on here as well. I think it was 13 something, correct? 1340?
1375.
1375. But there are days where, you know, maybe the landfill is receiving something closer to the maximum, and then there are days where it's receiving something well short of the maximum, right? And then you're getting the average tonnage.
Correct.
And the information you were given is that there isn't going to be any change with respect to the anticipated average daily volume. Is that correct?
Correct, there would be no change to the average daily volume or the maximum daily volume.
Okay. Did you have any type of scoping meetings with PennDOT, or is that something that would occur later?
No, we did not have a scoping meeting with PennDOT.
And is that, maybe that's partially because there's really not going to be any change with respect to the haul route? Is that true?
Typically, you'd have a scoping meeting with PennDOT to evaluate what you're going to be including in your study based on how much traffic you're going to be generating, but there were no anticipated increases because the limits were remaining the same.
All right. So was it your firm or you that specifically decided the intersections that would be evaluated, or was it you and someone else?
It was our firm.
And so there was no input from the township either on that?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. So let's just take a quick look at one of your charts, the Shimersville and Apple Butter level of service. I think it's table 2, table 1. So if I'm looking at the table 1 level of service and delay comparison, and now I've dropped down to Apple Butter Road, Shimersville Road, westbound left, and I go across to the PM peak hour. This is the one with the level of service E currently, correct?
Yes,
And that number that's listed in that column 40.1, is that the average number of seconds that a vehicle is waiting to make the left turn at that intersection?
yes,
Okay. So existing 2022, it's average 40 seconds, then 2022 existing 1800. What is that? What's the second column?
The second column is the existing conditions if the landfill was operating at the maximum daily volume.
All right. So you get a slight increase because that factors in that 27% increase that you talked about?
Yes,
So delay time, you get a very slight increase, not even a full second, if they're operating at maximum volume, correct?
yes.
And then if we look at a 10-year perspective, it jumps up about 8 seconds, or maybe a little bit more. Is
It's
that
a little
right?
over 7 seconds.
I'm sorry. Well, from, if it's from the existing though, the 40 seconds, it goes from 40.1 to 48.2, right? So that would be 8.1 seconds more.
Yeah, if you're looking at existing at
Oh, okay.
14 tons versus 18.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, but so a little over 7 seconds. And is that, that is based on PennDOT factors that you're utilizing for increases that are taking into account other increases in traffic over the 10-year period?
That's correct.
All right. So did you look at anything to try to remediate that problem? Is that part of your job when you're doing a traffic impact study to look at whether or not there are potential measures that could be taken to remediate?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we did investigate the possibility of signalization at the
Okay.
intersection, but again, the criteria are not satisfied.
Okay. What about a queue analysis? Did you do anything of that nature with respect to your traffic impact study?
Yes, table 2 is the 95th percentile queue
Okay.
for each of the movements.
And with respect to the results here, are there any queue lengths that are changing significantly that would have a detrimental impact in some way?
No.
And the 10 years that you decided on, is that based on Lower Saucon Township ordinances to do the comparison between existing and 10 years out?
No, it was not based on the township ordinance.
Isn't it true that PennDOT at this point normally only requires for you to look at a 5-year period?
Yes.
So why is it that we looked at 10 years?
Typically, we look at 10 years for landfills as it's a requirement for DEP.
Okay, so for
This
the permit,
this study was done to accommodate both entities' requirements.
gotcha, okay. So with respect to that particular use, PennDOT would normally have you look at a 10-year, or maybe it's the state, I should say, not PennDOT necessarily.
PennDOT specifically would have us look at 5 years.
All right. But for this type of use, when you're submitting a permit, they look at 10 years? Is that?
DEP does, yes.
Okay. With respect to the date that you picked, you've already been asked some questions about this, but that November 1st, 2022 date, there was nothing significant about that date. Is that correct with respect to either holiday or other type of issue associated with it?
Correct. It was just the first average weekday that we could get the count scheduled.
Okay. Let's see. So I heard you testify that your data was based on use of Synchro. I'm trying to find the table right now that you use that for. And that's a computer program, correct?
Yes, that's the capacity analysis software that we use to analyze the intersection capacity.
And that's something that's accepted by PennDOT, correct? The Synchro
Yes.
software? There's also something known as HCM, is that right?
HCS is the software, HCM is the manual.
Okay.
Yes, the Synchro reports that we printed out use the highway capacity manual methodologies. It does also give other methodologies and outputs, but the reports that we provide in our study meet the highway capacity manual.
Are there times though where you supply both numbers that come from Synchro as well as numbers that would come from the highway capacity manual?
As I mentioned, the printouts the reports in our study from Synchro are the highway capacity manual results.
So it's your testimony that if you use the highway capacity manual, it would be the same numbers that you're receiving from analysis using Synchro. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because we're using the highway capacity methodologies from Synchro. It can analyze the highway capacity manual outputs as if you're using the highway capacity software. It also has its own methodologies, but we didn't use those results.
Say that last part again. What do you mean by it has its own methodology, but we didn't use those results?
Synchro has different reports that it can output. They have different level of service grades, and they can look at the results in a different way, but those are not typically accepted by PennDOT. PennDOT will accept the highway capacity manual printouts from Synchro, which is what we provided in this, because it follows the highway capacity manual methodologies, which is in the highway capacity software, if we were to use that instead of Synchro.
Have you worked in any municipalities that specifically require numbers associated with just the HCM?
Yeah, most require HCM methodology, which again, Synchro is an acceptable software package to use because it does follow the highway capacity manual methodology when you provide these reports.
All right. Then you gave a little bit of testimony regarding crash data, and you have a chart in here related to crashes, right? Table 6. So I'll refer your attention to paragraph 12, crash analysis.
Yes.
The data that you obtained included 16 crashes along State Route 2012, right? And is that apple butter?
Yes.
Okay. Did you get any other crash data other than along State Route 2012?
The limits of our crash data request to PennDOT was from Shimersville Road to the eastern limits of the landfill.
So it, as you note here, it did include the intersection of Shimersville Road and Apple Butter.
Correct.
And the total number of crashes for, let's see, 2016 through 2021 was 16. Is that accurate?
Yes, along the Apple Butter Road.
And 12 of those 16 were at the intersection? Oh, it says at intersections, right? So it's not just at the Shimersville Road intersection.
Yeah, the 12 crashes were documented between Apple Butter and Shimersville and Apple Butter and Easton Road. The other 16 were not at intersections along Apple Butter Road.
All right, and would the driveway be would that be considered an intersection? The driveway for the landfill?
It could be, yes.
All right. And do we know specifically, how many of the crashes occurred at the driveway for the landfill?
I don't believe there were any details on the crash reports that specified it was at the landfill driveway.
All right. Did the reports indicate how many there were at the intersection of Apple Butter and Shimersville?
There were 11.
Okay. So then there's only one crash that was at some other intersection, right?
Correct.
And did the crash reports indicate what types of vehicles were involved, or whether vehicles associated with the landfill were involved, or is that not information we have?
The crash reports will give a vague description of the size of the vehicle, whether it's a car, motorcycle, small truck, large truck.
Okay. But even if it was a large truck, you wouldn't know whether it's landfill related, right?
Correct.
And you used some terminology when talking about these crashes. I think you said there was no correctable crash patterns. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And can you explain to me what that means?
A correctable crash pattern is when you're reviewing the crash data, if you notice that there's the same type of accident happening in the same location several times within a year or year after year, those crash clusters or areas would be further investigated to see what were the causes of those crashes. Is there a repeating or reoccurring issue that might be causing those crashes that could be fixed? An example would be, say, rear-end collisions at an intersection. It could be at a point where the sun rising or the sun setting is blinding drivers and they can't see the signal heads or something to that effect. So what we do is we would look at those crash clusters and look at them as possibly correctable crash patterns and see what types of improvements can be made to mitigate those.
Okay. And in this particular instance, you didn't note any of that, so there's not a specific area of concern where you say there's something that needs to be addressed or fixed.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Those are all the questions I have. Do you have any redirect?
Just a few points of clarification. So, Mr. Kramer, when you conducted the truck counts, that was for all traffic at those intersections, correct?
Yes.
Not just truck traffic, correct?
It was all vehicles at both intersections.
You engaged this company called Imperial, a third party, to conduct the actual truck or traffic counts, that is that what you testified to?
Yes.
Is it typical for engineers at Pannoni who are doing these types of studies to contract with third parties to conduct the actual traffic counts?
It is very common to contract a third party for counts.
Have you worked with Imperial before?
Yes.
Have you worked with other third-party vendors to conduct traffic counts before?
Yes.
Have any of those third-party vendors ever provided you with some sort of certification with respect to the information they provide you?
No.
You did your calculations based on what is the permitted maximum daily volume that the Bethlehem landfill is permitted to accept on a day, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know whether the landfill would be allowed to accept that amount of waste every day in a given month?
My understanding with the average daily volume and the maximum is that in any designated period, I'm not sure what that is with the permit, but the maximum daily and the average daily would have to be met. So on a particular day, the most it could accept would be the 1,800, but overall on average, it needs to be 1,375.
For the particular reporting period, whether that's a month or a quarter?
Yes.
And so it can never accept more than the 1,800 tons per day, is that your understanding?
Yes.
You were asked on cross-examination about trucks stopping at stop signs and then moving through an intersection. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
So just to follow up on that question, perhaps this is stating the obvious, but are trucks leaving the landfill, do trucks that are leaving the landfill weigh less than those same trucks coming into the landfill?
Yes.
Is it typical in preparing a transportation impact analysis to interview drivers of the cars that are part of the traffic counts?
No,
Is it typical to do any kind of anecdotal analysis of driver perception of the roads?
no,
Is it typical to talk to anyone using those roads about their particular experience when you're conducting this kind of analysis?
we don't typically request any kind of user feedback. The only type of coordination that would typically occur for a traffic study would be coordination with PennDOT and the municipality that's involved.
You were asked a few questions on cross-examination about projected future traffic based on growth rates. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And are the projections that you did for your report in this matter different in nature from projections that you do in any traffic analysis?
no, they're the same.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Any recross based on the redirect?
No.
Anyone else? Mr. Medina, come forward.
Cesar Medina, 2594 Revington Road, Hellertown, PA.
Okay, you have cross-examination based on just the questions that were asked now? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. You may proceed.
Will you consider they having more information for the study will give out a better, more clear result? Meaning inputs from different sources, like it was said before, from the residents.
Feedback from the residents wouldn't impact how we do this study or have any influence on the traffic volumes that we're analyzing for our reports.
What about visual observation of the roads in question?
We typically do that when we go out and visit the site and take site measurements and things like that. Observing the existing conditions of the roads, that's something we typically do anyway. Which we also did in this case.
But you weren't familiar with Lower Saucon Road to Apple Butter Road.
I think we're going
Conditions.
beyond the scope of redirect here. I'd have to object.
What is the question that you're trying to get at?
That for the analysis to be an analysis that present the firm and his expertise properly should be more inclusive of data and
I think that's more of an argument, Mr. Medina,
Okay.
that you're going to be able to make argument in this case later on. And I think you asked that question, when you were up here before. Do you have any other questions?
Just one last question is, is one day analysis what you do to all your clients when it comes to this studies?
Typically, we only need 1 day of information for a traffic study.
Throughout your career, that's what you've done, 1 day?
Typically, yes. In early in my career, before when people were doing traffic counts, manually, you might do a AM count 1 day and a PM count a different day, but you're still trying to get the average weekday peak volumes. In certain situations, or land uses rather, like retail, you might look at a Friday night and a Saturday midday. It depends on the use, but for this particular use and type of study, we only needed 1 day of data to capture the typical commuting peak hours.
And I don't know if I missed it, but did you say, was that typical comes from like the typical for the landfill is based upon, what was that? How you arrived to that was a typical day? I think I missed it.
A typical weekday, as far as data collection goes for our studies, is Tuesday through Thursday. Usually, you don't have people taking longer weekends or holidays, and Tuesday through Thursday is more consistent than looking at a Monday or a Friday. You don't have those odd variations.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? All right. You are excused. That's all we have for today, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Before anyone leaves, we need to talk about our next hearing date and time.
Scott, I'm sorry, but my
Oh, you want to move for the admission of
top-notch
exhibits?
paralegal, yes, reminded me to move for the admission of my exhibits.
All right. So
No
we,
objection to the admission of any of them.
all right. That would be BLC 77, BLC 78, BLC 79, and BLC 80, right?
Yes.
And we have no objection. Anyone else have an objection to the admission of any of those 4 exhibits? Seeing none, all those exhibits will be admitted into the record. And anything else before I announce the next hearing date? Okay, so after discussions with the attorneys, it looks like we're going to have the next hearing on April 5th at 9 a.m., and that will be at the Lower Saucon Township building. Is that Wednesday of next?
Yes, it's Wednesday,
Okay.
April 5th.
All right. We had that initially as a proposed date, but we are not going to be able to hold that. So the next hearing will be Wednesday, April 5th at the Lower Saucon Township building at 9 a.m. So we'll see everyone then. Do we need to discuss future dates at all? And if so, do we need to do that on the record or?
I don't think we need to do it
Okay.
on the record.
All right, very good. Then we're going to close out the hearing for today and we'll see everyone next week. Thank you.
You still want to, you want a copy of the transcript?
Is the 11th on Lower Saucon Town Hall, or is that here?
Oh, I'm sorry. The 11th, I'm expecting it to be at Lower Saucon. Well, is there a
Okay.
conflict that you're aware of? For
No, it's just so that people can be aware where
Sure.
to go. That's
Yeah, so I did get an email to Mark Hudson, the manager. And he said he's going to try to put the future dates up on the website. The problem is they change. Like today, I came in and we were already losing the 3rd, and then I hear we might be losing the 12th. So I can put them up on the website, but they're going to change.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. The township does this thing called a constant contact where they email the residents when they do stuff, but it's it's not always, so if you could just ask him if he could make sure that whatever the current schedule is emailed in the constant contact as well as the website, just so people know. Thank you.
So you have an issue with April 12th, right?
Yeah, probably.
There's a chance.
We're hoping that they are gonna get done on the 11th. If not, it'll get done on the 15th. Or the 14th. We'll start the following week. I think that's how we're gonna push it back. And then I'll get in touch with you about May dates, if you don't mind.
That's fine. Yeah. I'd rather get closer to May before I start scheduling them because I don't have all my notices.
Same here.